The heavy silence in the room was broken only by the rhythmic breathing of the two lovers, wrapped in the deep slumber that follows passion. It was that very sleep, so comforting and unguarded, that had allowed me to slip the handcuffs around my wife's wrist, securing her to the custom handcrafted ashwood headboard. She didn't wake immediately, merely stirred, her eyelids fluttering before they opened cautiously. Then, as realization dawned, a shrill cry burst from her lips, piercing the stillness of the bedroom. The sound startled her lover, Bob Simmons, into consciousness. With a groggy moan he turned, only to discover his own wrist was bound. Panic spread across his face, his instincts compelling him to jerk away. His struggle was clumsy, and in his desperation, he tumbled off the bed. A pained grunt accompanied the sickening twist of his arm, the handcuff cutting into his flesh as he scrambled back up onto the mattress. His eyes found mine at the foot of the bed, wide with horror, locked onto the weighty revolver in my hand. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. Words failed him. I could only assume that waking to find your lover's husband standing over you, armed with a large-caliber weapon, had a way of stealing one's voice. "Did you two sleep well?" I asked, my voice almost casual. "My God, Jerry, it's not what it looks like," my wife sobbed, her voice cracking with desperation. I exhaled a mirthless chuckle, shaking my head. "Then let me figure out what it looks like. You're lying in our bed, tangled up with a man who isn't me, and you want me to believe you're a faithful little wife." Bob swallowed hard, his throat bobbing as he forced himself to speak. "Don't do anything stupid, Jerry," he wheezed, his gaze never leaving the revolver. "She's not worth it. Don't throw your life away." That struck me. His words weren't those of a man protecting a woman he loved. They dripped with selfish fear, a coward's plea. It was almost amusing, how quickly passion faded when faced with consequences. "If you were still my wife, I suppose I'd have to defend your honor," I mused, my grip tightening on the gun. "But seeing as it doesn't look like you'll be my wife for much longer, I really don't care." She turned to me with tearful desperation. "Jerry, please put the gun down. We can talk about this. This isn't worth going to jail over." I scoffed. "I suppose the rose has lost its bloom, hasn't it? You trade sweet words in the dark, and now you throw insults in broad daylight. I thought you'd treat him with more respect, considering you were ready to destroy our marriage for him." Tears streamed down her face. "Jerry, we're not breaking up. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. I can fix this. I swear, I'll do whatever it takes." A bitter laugh escaped me. "And how exactly do you plan to fix this? Are you going to go back in time and not spread your legs for him? Because that's the only way I could ever see myself with you again." I inhaled sharply, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I loved you, Barb. God, I loved you so much. Life without you was hell before, and I can't go back to that. But if the alternative is living with a woman who betrayed me, what choice do I have?" I lifted the revolver to my temple, pressing the cold steel against my skin. The thought of ending it all flickered across my mind like a sinister whisper. She screamed, "No. Jerry, don't." "Do it," Bob rasped, his voice laced with panic. A cruel smirk played at my lips as I lowered the gun. An idea had taken root. I popped the drum of the revolver open, pressing the release so that 6 rounds tumbled to the floor. Kneeling, I picked one up between my fingers, feeling its weight. I heard Bob grunt as he thrashed, testing the strength of the headboard in his futile attempt to break free. Pathetic. Barb's face drained of all color as she watched me roll the bullet between my fingertips. "This is a .357 Magnum round," I said calmly. "It weighs 125 grams. When fired, it leaves the barrel at 500 feet per second. If it hits bone, it flattens, tripling the impact area. Even if you survive, you'll bleed out before help arrives." I met their eyes, making sure they understood. I hope that paints a clear enough picture. I slid the bullet into the chamber and spun the drum. The soft click-click-click of the roulette wheel of fate filled the suffocating silence. "You know how much I love to gamble, Barb," I murmured, my voice almost fond. "Before we met, it nearly ruined me. But I stopped for you. I only found the strength to quit because I loved you that much." I exhaled, shaking my head. "But since I have no idea what to do now, I guess I'll let fate decide." I lifted the gun, pointing it at Bob first. "Since you're the guest of honor, it's only fair we start with you." His body stiffened. His lips trembled. I cocked the hammer. "Would you like me to leave a message for your wife, Bob? Or maybe your daughters, Zoe and Chloe?" His breath hitched as I continued. "It'll be lonely at 726 Maple Lane if you don't make it through this. And they'll certainly have plenty to cry about when they open the package my investigator sent them." I considered sending a more tasteful selection of photos, but in the end, I figured your girls should see exactly what you were doing when you were working late at the office. Oh, and I made sure to include the ones of your other two mistresses. Thought your wife deserved the full picture." His complexion turned ghostly. He shook his head frantically, his lips forming silent prayers. Click. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. A strangled sob left his throat. His body shuddered violently, and the sheets beneath him darkened as the scent of urine filled the air. "Congratulations," I said coolly. "You get to see your daughters again." I turned to my wife. "How about you, Barb? Are you ready to meet your maker?" I tilted my head. "You went to church last Sunday, didn't you? Did you confess your sins? Or will you burn in hell for your adultery?" She closed her eyes, trembling. "Yes," she whispered. I leaned in. "I'm sorry, what was that?" Her voice broke. "Yes, Jerry. Adultery is a sin." Her shoulders shook with each breath. "I never confessed. If that bullet hits me, I'll go to hell." I met her tear-filled gaze. "Then let's see if your God wants you to live." Click. Her scream echoed through the room. Bob cursed. I let the silence stretch. Then, without a word, I lifted the gun to my temple once more. "You were my rock, Barb," I murmured. "The only thing that kept me from falling back into that dark place. Without you, there's nothing left." My finger tightened on the trigger. Click. I closed my eyes. Damn it. Bob's face was pale as I turned the revolver on him, the cold steel a mirror to the fear in his eyes. His breath came in quick, panicked gasps. "This might be your last few moments on Earth, Bob," I said, my voice even, almost curious. "So tell me, why married women? I genuinely don't understand. Your wife is attractive. Your daughters seem charming. Why?" His lips trembled, his hands clutching at the sheets as if they might somehow protect him. "Please, please don't kill me," he begged, his voice cracking. I sighed and cocked the hammer back with my thumb. Tears welled up in his eyes, his composure shattering like fragile glass. "It's the chase," he confessed, his voice raw. "The thrill of finding what turns them on, of making them forget their vows, even if just for a little while. Your wife, she was upset with you. Every marriage has rough patches, Jerry. Even the good ones. I just had to listen, to remind her how sexy she was, how desirable. And she fell into my lap." He swallowed hard, a sob catching in his throat. "This was going to be the last time. That's the rule. Once I sleep with another man's wife in his own bed, the game is over. I win." I stared at him, watching as he shrank under the weight of his own words. He was pathetic, sprawled there on the sweat-stained sheets, soaked in his own fear. A man reduced to nothing more than a trembling, sniveling mess. I should have taken a picture, but I didn't want to leave any evidence behind. He groaned, his muscles straining as he made another desperate attempt to break free from the headboard. The wood creaked under the pressure, but it held firm. I met his eyes. And pulled the trigger. Click. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. His body jerked once, then went completely still. For a moment, I thought he'd fainted, but his breath, shallow and shaky, told me otherwise. He was barely hanging on. I exhaled slowly and turned my gaze to Barb. "Well," I murmured, "it's either you or me now." I gave her a sad smile. "Honestly, I almost wish it wasn't you. Things would have been much simpler if I had just walked in, found you two in bed, and decided I couldn't take it anymore. Then I'd be dead. You'd be free. No messy murder, no guilt. Just one clean break." Her body was trembling, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "Jerry, please," she whispered, her eyes pleading. "You've made your point." Bob passed out from fear, sitting in his own piss. "You win. Just put the gun down. We can talk. We can even convince Bob not to press charges. You haven't done anything that can't be undone." I chuckled bitterly. "Undo this?" I gestured vaguely at the scene before me. "No, Bob. This can't be undone. You can't go back in time and unscrew him. You can't unbreak my heart." Tears streamed down her face. "Then let me fix it. Let me stay with you. Or leave me, I won't fight it. I'll sign any divorce papers you put in front of me. But if I can convince you to keep me, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. Please. Just don't do this." I studied her for a long moment. "Barb, I don't think I'm Jerry anymore," I admitted quietly. "When I found out about you and Bob, something inside me snapped. And when I realized you were doing it in my bed, well, whatever was left of me died." I sighed. "I think right now, I'm just the finger of fate." I pulled back the hammer. "Let's see if it's your time." Click. The hammer fell on another empty chamber. Barb let out a guttural scream, shaking so violently that the handcuffs rattled against the headboard. I lifted the revolver one last time and pressed it to my temple. "Looks like fate has spoken," I murmured. "I love you, Barb. I'm sorry it's come to this." Her voice was raw, panicked. "Jerry, please don't," she sobbed, her whole body thrashing as she fought against her restraints. "I'll do anything. I'll leave. I'll stay, and you can beat me senseless. Just please don't do this. God, someone help. Help." I closed my eyes. "It's better this way, Barb." Click. Silence. I exhaled, opening my eyes to find her staring at me, wide-eyed and horrified. I smiled. "I guess I should explain." Her breath hitched as she watched me, her expression caught between confusion and terror. "You see," I continued, "I was always pretty good with my hands. Gino might have mangled my left one, but my right hand? Still solid. Card tricks, chip shuffling, coin flips, they all teach you dexterity. And when you know what you're doing, getting a bullet out of a revolver's drum isn't that hard. Especially when your audience is too focused on the barrel to notice." I tilted the revolver slightly, rolling a single .357 Magnum round across my palm. The moment I tilted the revolver back, the game was on. I smirked. Because that's all this was, a game. Her breath shuddered in her chest. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I wanted you both to feel it." I stepped closer, leaning in so she could see the triumph in my eyes. "I wanted you to feel fear. To feel helpless. To feel what I felt when I realized the woman I loved had been screwing another man in my bed." I let the silence stretch, watching as she absorbed the weight of my words. Then, finally, I laughed. I laughed so hard my ribs ached, so hard that I had to brace myself against the bedpost to keep from doubling over. The look on her face was priceless. "What?" I gasped between wheezes. "Did you really think I'd go to jail for you too?" "Ha." Still chuckling, I bent down and scooped up the 6 bullets from the floor, loading them back into the revolver one by one. This time for real. Bob was beginning to stir. Barb was still sobbing, panting slightly between her cries. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key to the handcuffs, tossing it onto the bed. Bob's gaze flicked toward it. "Take the key," I told him. "Get your clothes. Get the hell out." His breath was shaky, his fingers twitching at his sides. "Think of this as a lesson learned," I added, my voice dropping to a cold, dangerous tone. "Right now, I'm letting you live. But if I hear so much as a whisper to the cops about what happened tonight, I will find you." I took a step closer, lowering my voice to a deadly whisper. "And I will make you suffer. Your wife. Your daughters. I'll make sure your entire family pays." Bob swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Would I actually follow through? Hell no. But he didn't need to know that. In the end, Bob never said a word. Barb signed the divorce papers without protest, likely grateful to escape with nothing more than her freedom. I didn't ask for much, just my grandmother's wedding ring and for her to take back her maiden name. She moved to Grand Rapids. Occasionally, she still sends me birthday wishes on Facebook. I never look at her profile. I wasn't lying when I said I loved her. I still do, in some twisted way. But I've moved on. There are more good days than bad now, and a few women who share my bed with no strings attached. As for Bob, he lost everything. His wife divorced him. He lives in a rundown one-bedroom apartment, drowning in spousal and child support payments. Before he blocked me, I sent him one last message. "If you ever want to end it all," I wrote, "you can borrow my revolver."